expatriate, as a foreigner most of my life. And it was an incredible learning experience because it enabled me to learn other cultures, to see my own country from a different point of view. I'm an atypical American citizen in the sense that I've spent more than half of my life living as a foreigner. Half of my life living in a country where I didn't speak the language, and that is difficult in one way, but on the other way, in another hand, it's extremely expanding. I was caught up in 4 coups d'etats, rescued by the French Foreign Legion, to whom I'm very grateful. I was put in jail in Angola, and for being the wrong nationality, and for a pair of shoes and my ability to speak Portuguese, I didn't have to get put in that horrible jail overnight. And that would have been a life-changing experience, I promise you, and I didn't want it and it didn't happen. But I was also in Caracas, Venezuela, when Hugo Chavez attempted his first coup d'etat, which failed. I could hear the gunfire from my apartment. And as I told many of you that were in Arkansas, I was chased by hippopotamus in Africa and had a very frightening experience. And in Africa, that would have been 1986, or maybe 87. A remarkable experience. I have actually video of the hippo before they started chasing me. As I told many of the people in Arkansas, I didn't realize when I went there that hippopotamus kill more than any other animal in Africa. And so I saw them on the beach in Port-Gentil, Gabon. And I saw a friend of mine that was an engineer, and I said, Casey, I said, there's 2 big hippos. Don't let them escape. I'm going to go get my camera. And so I ran back and got my video camera, and by this time they're in the ocean, and I walk right up to them and start filming them, and then this big 8,000-pound hippo raises his head and looks at me, and I thought, whoa. And I start walking backwards very, very slowly. And got to the edge of the water where Anne was with our son, and we sat in the edge of the water, and with mother's intuition, she said, let's get out of here. I think that hippo's going to charge us. And seconds later, this 8,000-pound hippo emerges from a wave, starts chasing us. I grab our 6-month-old son, and we are running. And there was a crowd of people that were on the beach 100 meters or so away that were watching it, and they were convinced they were about to see something horrific. And I thought it was going to stop chasing us when it got on land, but it didn't, and it got very close, like this far back behind. I thought I was going to have to toss our son to the side and try to divert it away. And it stopped. It was like it hit a glass wall, and that's what all of the people that watched it told us. And it was, for us, an incredibly profound experience. If there was ever an intervention that changed my life or that we felt like was an angel coming in, that was it. And there was another probable reality that we were showed in dreams that didn't come out so well. But that was an issue in our life where something miraculous happened, and that we considered to be an angelic intervention as one possibility. The other possibility was that it was the chili and beans I had the night before, and the hippo got a little too close. But either way, it was a remarkable experience, and so we've had an interesting life. And my point is that I truly consider myself a citizen of the world, and that I live on a planet, not a country. And I have been given the opportunity to live in South America, to live in India, to live in Russia, to live in Africa for a great number of years, the Middle East, and learn a lot, spend a lot of time in Asia. So I was able to really understand what the planet was. I never really lived in countries where I spoke the same language, and so I read a lot. And I read metaphysical books. I was on the banks of the Amazon River when a German man handed me the Edgar Cayce book that changed my life, that transformed me from a born-again Baptist wannabe to a person that saw the greater reality. And that happened on the banks of the Amazon River, and that was a remarkable experience. And from that point forward, I read every book I could get my hands on that was about metaphysical topics. And so for 30 years, I never watched much television, but I read very often 5 books a week, and became, as a geologist, interested in why sacred sites were sacred, why certain people were drawn to certain places. And I wrote my first book about this because I would hear people say, oh, there's a portal in my bedroom and there's a ley line in my front yard, and I knew there was more to it than that. And I wanted to take the woo-woo out of something that I think is a very valid science as a geologist and as a person that very often would fast and seek spirit in certain places. And so that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to talk about the dynamics of the living earth, and we will begin here. Now I'm going to skip through a little bit of this in order to be fair to Yuri and Dr. Arina, who will be talking about sacred sites in Russia. But I'm going to talk mainly about, and I mentioned this today, but I will again mention the magnetic reversals that the Earth has had. Our solar system is a series of magnetic bubbles that are concentric within other bubbles, plasma within magnetic fields that are separated from each other by huge flowing sheets of electrical currents. It's a pattern that's repeated throughout the rest of the plasma universe. And so I will tell you how I think all of these things determine sacred sites. Graham and I did an interview this morning, and he said he is absolutely convinced there are places on the earth in which wormholes exist, portals exist, and we spoke about ley lines, and that is going to be the main thing that I talk about today. But there have been many magnetic reversals on the planet Earth. We talked earlier about the 11-year cycle of the sun in which the magnetic reversals occur. How many times do you think the Earth has rotated its magnetic poles? Give me a couple of numbers. How many? How? 50,000? 70,000. Who else? 14? The magnetic field has reversed approximately 170 times over the past 100 million years, or about once every 580,000 years. And at that rate, 7,750 times in the Earth's 4.5 billion years. Now, I want to talk a little bit about grids, about what grids do and what they are. And the best way that I describe the planetary grid system, and I talk a lot about the double pentadodecahedron that I think is the planetary grid now. Grids are a confusing topic, and a lot of people find it hard to really understand exactly what grids are. And so this is the way Metatron explained it to me, and I explain it to you. The grid is Windows 2012. It's like a computer program that has a lot more subfiles and programs offering than the old stuff did. You know how we used to use the old DOS computer and you were very limited, and now we have Windows and it's a lot easier? That is what the grid of the Earth is, the new grid. Now there's been a lot of different studies and a lot of people that I have high respect for, that I highly respect in the grid arena, have a different view. They talk about an icosahedron or a dodecahedron grid map, and they suggest in many situations, people like Ivan Sanderson and Becker Hoggins, that every sacred site on the planet exists within one of the facet lines of a icosahedron grid. And I feel, with due respect, that that is a simplification that simply does not cover the power nodes of the planet. While there is an absolute validity to geometric grids and latitudinal alignments, and Richard, of course, talks about 19.5, and I absolutely agree with that, I also think that the 51st parallel is a very special place for my own reasons. But I suggest that the mineralogy also defines sacred sites and power nodes more, if at least as much, if not more, than geometric grids. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is there any questions on that, about the grid or about sacred sites? I think there's one back there. Yes? Exactly. She asked if the 51st parallel goes into Prague, and it does. It goes through Victoria, Canada, through Lake Louise, through Quebec, all across Canada, into Stonehenge, Avebury, in Ireland, through Ireland, crossing right through Newgrange, through the Ural Mountains, and through Lake Baikal. In the southern hemisphere, it passes through Chile at Las Torres del Paine. So 51st parallel is a very powerful place. And so I suggest that it is not just grid placement, that it is both. That there are very often power nodes that don't necessarily occur on the facet point of a geometrical grid. This is what the Becker-Hagens icosahedron grid looks like. You get an idea of trying to place that in there, and it's on the right. It's on the right idea. There is a icosahedron grid. There is a dodecahedron grid, but they don't necessarily define where sacred sites are. The idea of trying to point sacred sites, as they've done here, in one of these vertices or vortex spots, simply is too limiting. And there are sacred sites that are purely power nodes because of the mineralogy. I was talking to someone in this group today about a place called Needle Rock in Colorado that is one of the least recognized power points on this planet. And it is a volcanic plug of almost entire magnetic iron nickel, and it is a wormhole. The first time Ann and I saw it, we didn't even know it was there. It's a national monument not too far from Durango, Colorado. We saw it from about 20 miles away and were just drawn to it. And when we got there, we saw the cigar-shaped UFOs, and just an amazing, amazing location. And it is probably not on a grid point. That is a perfect example of a magnetic site because of its mineral content that is just extraordinary. The Grand Canyon is another such place. The Grand Canyon, I've had the grand opportunity, not to play on words, but to raft through the bottom of the Grand Canyon 5 times for 240 miles. 5 times. Some of you may have done that with me on one of the trips where we took people on that. And yes. And so you start out, you literally go to the center of the earth. You start out where the canyon walls are 60 feet high and the rocks are only about 70 million years old. And within 3 days, the canyon walls are 5,000 feet high and the rock is 2.6 billion years old. Billion with a B. You are literally in the center of the earth, and that is remarkably an area that has incredible Egyptian names like Set, like Ramses, like Isis, and you have certain formations called after Buddhist names, and Zoroaster, and it's interesting that why the geologist would have given them these names. But metamorphic rock is what occurs at that age, and metamorphic rock is an enormous crystal. I've told people before about the tremendous advantage that a lot of people that live in Canada have because of a metamorphic rock that occurs and covers almost half of eastern Canada, and that's called the Canadian Shield. Are you guys aware of that? It's an enormous crystal. It's over 2 billion years old. And as I have told people, it comes right down into Wisconsin. So that is why people from Canada and a few people from Wisconsin are generally in a far more balanced state than many people from the United States are. I used to have my supervisor in the engineering firm I worked for, and I was a Canadian, and he told me that when he left Canada and moved to the United States, it raised the average IQ of both countries. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
The Parliament building in Ottawa
is sitting on courts. And well, I will say this. I've spent a lot of time in Canada, and I love Canada, and I can feel the difference in the vibration. Canadian people in general, and I'm not saying this to patronize, But Canadian people in general are far more balanced and even than most people in North America, and that is a fact that I've discovered. But Canadians also have the advantage of being between the 50th and 60th parallel, which offers more balance magnetically, and they have the advantage of the Canadian Rockies in the west and the Canadian Shield in the east, and that is why Canadians generally are nicer people than Americans are in some circumstances. And that's been my experience. And it's not necessarily a credit as much as a responsibility, because you have that advantage. And there are the people from Wisconsin that get the Canadian Shield as well, like Bruce, that seem very even-tempered. So it is very often, my point is that it is the mineralogy that often defines us far more than you may think. Far more than you may think, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And so where you live, the attributes of the minerals of where you live can determine a lot about the energy that you deal with, whether or not you're balanced or imbalanced, aggressive or non-aggressive. We talk about astrological influences, and those do indeed occur as well. But you find certain attributes that we considered cultural that, and Europe is a perfect place to talk about that. You see certain characteristics of people from Germany, people from Italy, people from France, and people from Britain that are a little bit different. They say that a perfect world is when the Germans are the mechanics, the Italians are the lovers, the French are the chefs, and the British run the train stations. And that the imperfect world is when the British are the cooks and the Italians run the trains and the Germans are the police. And so there are certain attributes that I think are due to the mineral systems of places that we live. And so I think the mineralogy has a lot more to do with it. Now, there have been a lot of grid ideas that have been put forth, like the dodecahedron of the Earth star, that puts it in a 12-point. Now this is, I spoke about the Grand Canyon, and this is one of the groups that we went into the Grand Canyon. And is Ken in this one? Yeah, are you in this photograph, Ken? The Jean-Claude Savard is here, and he's in this group today. And who said that? Janie is in there. Let's see who else. There's Linda Roebuck and Nia is in this photograph. I think Adrian's in here. Okay, well, Ken, you know Ken. When we went through the Grand Canyon, and we went to this remarkable place called Elf's Cavern, you see this waterfall right here? You have to go on this really difficult trek and go all the way up to here, and then you can jump down into this 10, 12-foot crystal clear pool of water. And this man, Ken, on his 67th birthday, did that 3 times. And my point is that the Grand Canyon is a remarkable rejuvenator. The energy that is in there is a perfect example of some of the energies that I find exist in the earth. You've got 5,000-foot walls on both sides. You've got a moving water that creates plasma, which I call hydrolines, and those walls hold it in. Another example of that is Lake Louise in Canada. Lake Louise in Canada has the Victoria Glacier on the back, and what is a glacier except a crystal of water? And you have on the other 2 sides granite, which is feldspar, mica, and quartz being 40% of granite. And then you have this incredible colored water in Lake Louise. You have it in several places in Canada on the west, but this is not regular water. This is an unusual water. Water is what they call a Newtonian fluid, right? That just drops back out. It has no viscosity. It is always is eliminated at 33 seconds per liter when it is taken through a marsh funnel. Whereas in Lake Louise, you have a different type of water, a different type of liquid, I should say, that is called a colloidal water, a plastic fluid. Colloidal water is like milk. It has a permanent suspension. And it is that permanent suspension that gives Lake Louise and Peyto Lake and Lake Moraine and Emerald Lake and Lake O'Hara, which is a stunning place in the Canadian Rockies, that remarkable color. It is what they call glacier silt, or glacier silt, as Ann would say. And that silt is silicon. So silicon dioxide is quartz. So Lake Louise and all of those Canadian lakes and all of the ones that occur in Las Torres del Paine in southern Chile and Patagonia are also liquid crystals. Suspended glacier silt, suspended silicone, those are liquid crystals. And that creates an incredible energy. And so at Lake Louise, it's trapped on both sides by these 800-foot high granite. And then this Victoria Glacier at the back end, and at the other end there is a building built out of crystallized limestone that we call marble, called Chateau Lake Louise, that holds it in place. And that is one of the most remarkable places on the planet, Lake Louise, Canada, and it anchors the energy of Archangel Michael. And it is a wonderful place. How many have been there? Lake Louise is, in my opinion, in the summer, the most beautiful place in North America. And it is absolutely worth going to. And I used to go there as much as I could. And I went there once in May, and the lake was still froze completely solid over. And I thought, and there were people walking out on it. And I thought, well, I'll give that a try. This is April. I had my little walking stick, and I walked, and that's a very deep lake. Lake Louise is 100 meters deep, and it's, it is really half a degree below freezing. When it's, or above freezing when it's liquid. And so I walked out to the middle, and suddenly my foot went down about 6 or 8 inches into the ice, and water just came in, and I was panicked. And I thought, oh my God, newspaper article, man disappears in Lake Louise. So I walked out of there and got back, and later I was told that you just have pockets of water that they can measure, and the actual ice is probably still 3 or 4 feet deep. But that was enough for me to not want to walk on the ice anymore. But it is a remarkable place, Lake Louise, and it is an example of how energy gets trapped in certain places. Sacred sites, power nodes, are very often the result. You've got this crystal that puts out this energy, this liquid crystal that puts out the energy as well with that radiant, vibrant color. You've got the granite and the quartz that holds it in. And so it's like the Grand Canyon in the sense that it holds that energy in a bowl shape. How many of you have been to Avebury Stone Circle in the UK? You've got a remarkable expression of earth energies and ley lines there, but if you look around Avebury, you're in a bowl. There's hills all the way around, so it holds that energy. And so the way energies work is that the earth itself is a small ocean of ions, of electrical charges. We're walking through 2 or 3 feet of it everywhere we go. And when you have points like this, they become anodes and cathodes, just like you see on the top of a battery. We took people to Egypt, and I showed you the orb photo. Almost every temple we went to, I saw it and felt a recognition, but on the top was an anode and cathode. It was like that 2 points coming up. Every place. And I had the absolute awareness that they had tapped into the electrical system of the earth, and that they had brought it into an anode-cathode situation, brought it in through the obelisk, amplified it to the sacred lakes, which have the feminine energy, and brought it into this area called the Holy of Holies. And that's the way that it works. Because this electrical energy that occurs from the earth occurs from a lot of sources. You have solar energy. When you have organic matter that decomposes, it actually produces an electrical charge. And you heard Richard talk earlier about using dinosaurs. Oil is produced from the decomposition of organic matter. And that's what he was meaning. But this decomposition of organic matter actually puts out an electrical charge. You have tectonic plates that are pushing with tremendous energy, and all that energy gets released. The solar energy, the air energy, the friction, the waves, all of this creates this pool of electricity, and that electricity is not static, meaning it has a dynamic flow. And so when I was trying to understand about ley lines, it occurred to me, how would electricity flow? It would flow along the path of least resistance, meaning that if it is dynamic, it's going to flow along a path of what? Conductivity. Minerals that are conductive: iron, copper, quartz, water. It's going to flow along those lines, and that is what the people in ancient China would call a dragon line. And then during the time of Atlantis, they really mastered the flow of the electrical earth, as the Egyptians also carried from Atlantis. And they were able to groom that energy, very often running it through crystals, and they formed what is called ley lines. And there's a British man by the name of Alfred Watkins that came up with the term of ley line, ley meaning straight. And he simply meant that there were these small monolithic rocks that were along certain straight lines in Britain. But what a ley line really means for me is that it is a groomed form of earth energy that follows a certain path, and that groomed energy can be conscious, can be aware of itself. That is the high frequency that it has. And so you have what is called the Michael line and the Mary line in the UK that is said to begin at Skellig Michael and go all the way to Temple Mount in Israel. It actually circumnavigates the globes, but it's broken in parts now. It's being reestablished. But that is what ley lines are, in my opinion.
In Ireland, they call them boring the sheep, dairy paths.
Yeah. The ley lines, they call that?
Dairy paths.
Okay.
If you had your house was built on one, you'd have to open a window on both sides.
Interesting. It's sort of like the...
The sheep.
Yeah.
The sheep is where the shining is when
Interesting. So here's another photograph of our Grand Canyon group. This is a group that we took to Bolivia in 2011. And all of the people in this group, and Bruce is part of that, there's a great many of you that are part of that. We spent 2 weeks in Bolivia between 13,000 and 17,000 feet. Bolivia has the highest airport in the world at La Paz, and it's higher than the airport of Kathmandu, Nepal. And on the last 3 days, we went and took the medicine plant together, 2 of them. We did San Pedro, and we did ayahuasca. And we experienced it in a very interesting way because we spent 6 months building up an energy field. Graham talks a lot about the ayahuasca experience, and he did it a few weeks ago in Brazil, and we were talking about that. I've done it about 6 times. We always did it in a sacred way, and it is not anything I would necessarily recommend for everyone, but it is something that I absolutely benefited from. But I knew how to, I was guided by Metatron on how to do it. And so when we took a group down there to do it, and I've done that 3 times, we spent 6 months on the internet, on a webinar, meditating together with Vogel crystals, building a protective thought form so that negative energy could not come in. And I think all of us had a remarkable experience. The worst thing you could do is go to Peru or go to the Amazon and do ayahuasca if you do not know the shaman. Many of the shamans in South America are into wizardry. I'm not saying that they all are, but I'm saying that you make yourself vulnerable when you take psychotropic plants. And you take a risk if you're around someone who is an energy taker. And there are energy vampires in that part of the world and in every place. And when you open yourself up and you leave your body and go into higher dimension, you need to have a protective field around you. I had a remarkable experience every time I did the plant, but I prepared for it diligently 6 months at a time, and I would never do it with strangers.
Are you going to do it again?
Probably not. At least not take a group down. There is a certain risk involved with taking people to do that. And I wanted to do it, and I was led to do it, but you have certain liabilities when you take a group to do it. But this group did it, and it was remarkable. And Bruce was with us. Weren't you with us, Elaine? You didn't do that one. Yeah. And Linda, where's Linda Roebuck? Is she in here right now? She's doing a healing session, probably. But we had 3 people that did it, and then right after we finished, they did a 24-hour ceremonial dance with San Pedro to honor the jaguar energy in Bolivia. But it was a remarkable experience, and the shaman that we did it with was someone that I had a past life connection. I'll just tell you briefly the story. I had done an earth dance ceremony and met some Peruvians, and so I went down on a geology mission to Bolivia, and when I finished my work, I had arranged to have about 6 free days. And so I went to the airport, and I told the airport attendee I wanted to fly to Puno, Peru. And I was in La Paz, Bolivia, and she says, well, you're going to have to go to Buenos Aires, and then go to Lima, and then go to Cusco, and then it was just a remarkable, and it's like a 3-hour drive from where I was. And so in Bolivia and Peru and Ecuador, you have a majority of indigenous people, so these plant medicines are not illegal, and they're not looked down upon, and they're not done recreationally. Ayahuasca could never be done recreationally because there's nothing fun about it. And you meet yourself, and you absolutely face every imperfection that is there, and you have a chance to work through it. At least that was my experience. But she said, well, you know, she said, if you're going to do the vuelo de condor, the flight of the condor, you can do that here. And she said, this is a man that does it. And so I called this phone number up, and I said, I'd like to do the plant medicine. We're speaking in Spanish, and he said, how did you get my number? And I said, well, the lady at the tourist agency gave it to me. And that didn't go over very well. And he said, are you a gringo? And in Bolivia, that's not a detrimental term. And I said, yes. And he said, I don't do this for strangers. And he says, I have to know you. I have to make sure you're ready, and you have to do some preparations. And I said, well, look, I said, I'm on the path. I just did a 6-day vision quest, and I really want to do this, and I have a few days, and I'd be grateful if you give me the opportunity. And he said, well, let me think about it. And he says, call me back in 2 hours. And so I called him back in 2 hours, and he said, where are you from? And I said, well, I'm from Arkansas, but I live in Houston. And he goes, oh, well, my college roommate. Well, he said, I went to school in the United States. In fact, he had a master's degree in anthropology. And he said, my college roommate's from Houston. And he said the man's name. He said, do you know him? And I said, well, there's only about 10 million people in Houston. What's his name again? And he said, Neil so-and-so. And I said, well, I work with a guy named Neil. In fact, he's vice president of human resources. He's an attorney. And he said the name of the company. And I said, yep, that's the one. And he says, okay. He said, meet me at Iglesia San Michel at 7 o'clock. And so I drove out there, and we went up to 17,000 feet at this place on this enormous volcano outside of La Paz, and I thought, what have I gotten myself into? And I did the experience and had a remarkable experience that I totally gained from. And I also had something on the HR representative of our company, and he never gave me any more hassle after that. I said, Neil, I said, I've met a friend of yours in Bolivia. And his name's Miguel. And I never had any issues with human resources after that. But he was a wonderful guy, actually, and I began doing sweat lodges with him after that. This is our group in Egypt. We had 130 people that went to Egypt in 2012. when all the riots were going on, and we never had any problem. And it was absolutely an amazing experience. This is Salar Uyuni in Bolivia, and that's not a good photograph, but all of this is hexagonal salt. That is the purest air on the planet. It's about 90 miles long, 30 miles wide, pure complex salt, not just sodium chloride. And salt is a remarkable cleansing tool, and so that is an incredible place that we went to in Bolivia. Another example of how a mineral determines the energy. That's a dried lake. That salt is 90 meters thick and 30 miles wide and 60 miles long, and it is crystalline. See the crystal pattern on it? And imagine being in that. You're breathing absolutely the cleanest air on the planet. And salt puts out an anionic charge, a negative charge that opens the pineal. First time I went down there, I was by myself, as I often am in those days of traveling. And I ended up on a Jeep tour with 4 or 5 Europeans. And we came upon this place on an island. I say an island, it was a little piece of land that came out of the salt, and right in front of it was a pool of water. And I, as a geologist, understood what saturated salt water is. In other words, when you put enough salt in water where it will not absorb anymore, it takes on extraordinary properties that are very, very healing. First of all, you can't sink in it, but it becomes an absolute bactericide, but it also is extremely electrical. So I convinced everyone, well, let's just sit in this 4 feet of saturated salt water. And so we did, and everyone was pretty impressed with me, I think. And then we walked up to the hill, and we were completely covered in dried salt. And we were supposed to stay there for 3 days, and so we said to the people, can we take a shower? And they said, well, we don't have any running water. And so their impression of me dropped pretty quickly, and they didn't take my advice on anything else that we did. And we dropped around with cake salt for the next 3 days, and it burned in places. This is Avebury, a remarkable stone circle in the UK, a perfect place where ley lines flow through. And I was telling Graham this morning that I think that ley lines, that when they hit a stone circle, it's an amplifier. They spin around faster, create an anti-gravity field, and then go to the next one. In Avebury, you have one that goes clockwise and one that goes counterclockwise, and you have an oblique stone in the middle that is absolutely the most powerful place in that stone circle. It is remarkable.
Point out that is there any connection between the crop circles that form around Avebury and the ley line?
There's an absolute connection, and it's just the example is that the question, if you didn't hear it, is she said, is there a connection between the ley lines in that part of England and the crop circles? And absolutely there is. That part of Britain. In fact, Britain is one of the most alive, energetic places I have ever experienced on the earth. All of the spectrums of life occur there vividly. It is interesting that so many people there have the stories and the traditions and the fables about the Devic kingdom, and that is because they exist more vividly there. There are, if you think of energy as occurring more thickly, more densely in certain areas, and these are life force units of consciousness. It's like, I tell people when I go to a sacred site, it's like switching from regular television to high definition. Everything seems alive. When you go to places like Avebury, when you go to places like Lake Titicaca, I can see sparkles that just seem to flash out of the air. It is life so thick that the consciousness units are there. And that is why the indigenous people, the campestral societies, went to these places to pray. Because when there is that much life force there, and you can go into the pineal, into the theta wave, you can manifest your prayers more vividly, more rapidly. And that is why these places were always chosen as living churches. The campestral societies, the indigenous people, always were aware of nature far more than we are today. And they knew when they were in a place that had thick collection of life force. And they knew that those were places to pray. Those were places to vision out of your body in a natural way. And that's why they would go and fast for 5, 6, 7 days. That's why in the ancient days, the people in the time of Jeshua and Jesus would go and fast in the desert, which happens to be quartz. But when you go into these places that have a condensed life force, you can absolutely manifest reality much, much faster. And that's why they were chosen. The UK is an absolute collation of some of the greatest life force energy on the planet. And it is remarkably different from one end to the other. But you have a full spectrum of life force that exists there on the electrical spectrum. You have the Devic kingdom in what we might call the positive field, but also in what we might call the negative field. And these aren't good and evil, they're just electrical. And there have been times when we've been in places in Scotland where we would be in an incredibly beautiful place like the Trossachs, or when we were in the Sierra Nevadas in Venezuela at 15,000 feet in the Andes, and we would see a beautiful Devic spirit and then see a gargoyle. And those may have been our own interpretations of those energies we were seeing as our pineal was opened. And they can't really be defined as good and evil. But one was anionic and one was cationic. But they exist in spectrums of life in these places when there is greater life force there. And that's what's happening to our planet as a whole. But there are certain places on the earth where this happens. And I'm going to go through this a little faster to be fair to Yuri and Dr. Irina and let them speak. So here's our Egyptian family. Our Ireland family that we were there just last September. We did the same thing at Las Torres del Paine. This was taken just a few months ago. We have some other people here from Chile, don't we? Where are our people from Chile? What a beautiful country you have, and we honor you for coming here. But Chile is one of the most beautiful places on the planet. It is the Banff of South America. The 51st parallel passes through Patagonia, and this is a real picture. Where's David Stroud? Is he in the room right now? He actually took this photograph. There he is over there. And I think the first time I went to Patagonia was a long time ago, and I promised I'd always take people back. But Las Torres del Paine is a massif in the Andes. It's off the Andes. It's much younger than the Andes. It is one of the most special, one of the most beautiful places in the world. Chile is one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and it has a very positive energy. You have one of the largest deposits of lapis lazuli in the world, which is the stone that creates spirituality. And I was just very, very impressed with it, and I really enjoyed Chile. And there's another photograph of Las Torres del Paine, which means the Towers of Purple. And I'll go back to that other photograph. See these 3 towers right here? Those are all 9,000 feet high, and they're solid granite, and they're purple. That's why Las Torres del Paine means the purple towers, and it is an incredible sacred place. And we also went to Rapa Nui, and that's our group in front of the Moai. And Robert Schock has recently come up with a research, and he's the one that determined the real age of the Sphinx, where he says the heads there are actually 12,000 or more years old, and he has scientific evidence to support that. But it was an incredible place. And it is like Delphi in Greece, considered the navel of the world. It is on the precession of the equinoxes, one of the most powerful places on the planet. It is 2,000 miles off the coast of Chile and is part of the nation of Chile. Amazing. What was that? Oh, that is Mount Shasta. That's a lenticular cloud, and those occur almost always over volcanoes. Shasta is a volcano. You go to South America, you go to Chile, to Volcan Osorno, and you get the same thing. You go to Katmai in Alaska, you get the same thing. this is Shasta, but the basalt in volcanoes almost always contains iron, and when it dries, it is magnetized and points one direction. The water has a positive charge, the iron has a negative charge, and so these circular clouds form. Either that or it's Syrian ships, so you decide. I don't know. I fasted on top of Mount Shasta in 2007 for 5 days. And had incredible experiences up there. It is a remarkable place. It is one of the most powerful places on the planet. Amazing. So I'm just going to determine, these are my ideas, sacred sites and power nodes. There are several different types. Natural telluric energies, telluric meaning of the earth. These are mineral deposits such as gold, quartz, and diamonds, mountains, rivers, natural. And these are places where the energy is thick, and it affects through induction our magnetic field called the aura. There are man-made structures that garner and collate energy, such as pyramids and cathedrals built to sacred geometry. How many of you have been to the cathedrals in France, the cathedrals in England? You walk in there and you feel that energy. Some of them actually are tuned to certain chakras. Remarkable energies. They're all across Egypt. They're all across Europe, and amazing. So that creates a higher point of energy. Grid points. These are the points where there are just certain grid alignments that receive cosmic energies. Sacred plant life. Fields created by oak and particularly giant sequoia and redwood and other plant life systems. Coral systems in Australia. Certain plants put out incredible vibes. Have you not walked around these oak groves or certain trees? When you walk among the giant sequoia, holy cow, how many of you have really done that and spent time among them? They are absolutely vortexes on their own, and there is a scientific basis behind that. But these create energy fields as well that are absolutely unique and benevolent. Human imprint sites, places where energy is recorded, a tomb of a great leader, a site of historic or religious events. How many of you have been to Gettysburg battlefield? You can feel that energy imprint, can't you? Absolutely, you can feel it. If you've been to places like Lincoln's tomb, which is built to sacred geometry, you feel a certain sense of reverence. So you go to places where humans go and they exude an emotion, and it can add to the energy. And I'm going to give you another example. I spoke earlier about Lake Louise. If you've ever been to Lake Louise about late July and you walk around there and you say, my God, this is beautiful. It is a living cathedral, and it lofts your spirit. And part of your energy becomes part of that place. And that, people say to me, it's too commercial. I say, no, it's not. I say it brings out the best in everybody, and it adds to the energy, because you cannot go to Lake Louise and not feel spiritual. You cannot go there and not be awed by that beauty, and it opens you, and I can feel that now. And you put that energy in there, and it collects it, and you become part of it. Every time you visit a sacred site, you go in there and you acknowledge the conscious spirit of place, and part of it comes into your auric field as well. And so many of the people that are earth keepers that travel the world carry that energy and help share it. That's why so many people are led on pilgrimages. So I'm going to end this now. In fairness, I will take a couple of questions. Thank you very much for your being with us. Yes. I have been to Newgrange very recently. Skellig Michael. We spent 10 days in Ireland. It is a remarkable place. And I'll tell you something that you may not know about Ireland. Ireland used to be part of Africa. Did you know that?
One of its original names was Voodoo.
267 million years ago, Ireland, at the time of the Pangea continental drift, was part of Africa. And so part of the sands that are in Ireland are the same ones that are in the Sahara Desert. Ireland is very different from the rest of the islands around Great Britain, and very, very different geology and an incredibly sacred place. Incredibly sacred place. I love Ireland. And it was amazing. Skellig Michael is another one of my favorite places, and we all took the 13-kilometer boat trip out to Skellig. We prayed for the good weather, and we got it, and we all climbed up it. Ken, you were with us for Skellig Michael. Ken went to the top. And we, unlike the Grand Canyon, he didn't jump off into the water, thank goodness, but that's an amazing place. Yes, Ramal.
Have you been to Niagara Falls?
I have not been to Niagara Falls, but it is an amazing, and that will be plasmic energy. When water crashes, it releases an anionic charge, the same effect that you get at the ocean waves when they're crashing. It creates a plasmic field, and it is a solid field, and it is the anionic vibration that is the feminine vibration that makes us feel good. And if you think in terms of male-female, it is the anionic charge that is feminine, that is more benevolent. And gentlemen, you never want to say that it is the negative vibration that is the feminine. You say the anionic. But it is the anionic that is more benevolent, that works better with us. A-N, you know the word ion, I-O-N. And speaking of ion, I'll talk about Iona, but you just A-N means it's negative, C-A-T means it's positive. I'm going to end with Iona. How many have been to the island of Iona? Very sacred place. You have to go to Oban, then you take the ferry, you get on the island of Mull, you drive around, and then you take another ferry to Iona. And Mull is a beautiful island in Scotland that has 360 million year old purple red quartz. Beautiful. Lots of places for monasteries. Yet St. Columba chose Iona. And so Iona is very vulnerable. It's generally flat. It's 7 miles long. And I wondered, why did he choose that place? I'm going to go through and find a picture of Iona. And true enough, it was wiped out by the Vikings on several occasions. And then I got to looking at the geology of Iona. Iona is the Lewiston schist, one of the oldest rocks on the planet, like the Canadian Shield. And it is called the Lewiston schist. It only surfaces on the earth in 5 locations, and every one is a very sacred place recognized by the ancients and the Druids. This is Staffa Island. It's a giant crystal. Did you see Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Devil's Rock they call it? That is also crystallized basalt. This is hexagonal. There's a cave on Staffa Island called Fingal's Cave that I spent a full day in, and some of those basalts are hexagonal crystals that are 6 feet across. And look at the color of that water. The German composer Mendelssohn wrote a movement about Fingal's Cave, and it is a giant pipe organ. It is musical, it is a generator, it is a giant crystal 2 miles across, and it is 7 miles away from the island of Iona. It is the wind beneath the wings of Iona. It's the generator. Iona is 7 miles of a metamorphic crystal called the Lewiston schist, and it puts out an incredible vibration, and that is why St. Columba chose it. Thank you all very much.